Good morning to all esteemed viewers and participants of the fourth Global Multidisciplinary Conference on Social Sciences, Education, and Technology from all over the world. Today, my colleagues Jayce Roswell, Zivanka Maleeha, and I, Kayla Isabelle, will present our paper, which examines the socioeconomic effects of tourism development in Komodo National Park on local communities with a specific focus on Labuan Bajo. Originally established for conservation purposes, Komodo National Park has gradually evolved into both a protected ecological site and a major tourism destination, placing local communities at the intersection of conservation, state-led development, and private investment. It is these factors which will be further explored in this paper. Further ado, let us begin discussing our focus and scope of the study. This study aims to present three key areas. First, it describes the historical and current social and economic conditions of Labuan Bajo, examining how these have been shaped by the actions of the state, corporations, and conservation organizations operating within Komodo National Park. Second, it investigates how these social and economic factors impact Labuan Bajo as a case study location, particularly in terms of income distribution, employment patterns, cultural change, and community dependency on tourism. Third, the paper provides background information on Labuan Bajo and the establishment of Komodo National Park, identifying key stakeholders involved in tourism development. By the end, through this approach, the study seeks to understand how tourism development in Labuan Bajo has simultaneously produced economic growth while reinforcing existing inequalities. By the end of the paper, possible solutions and future steps will also be detailed. Komodo National Park was first designated as a wildlife sanctuary in 1965 and later established as a national park in 1980, with the primary goal of conserving the endangered Komodo dragon. In 1991, it was recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, further elevating its global significance. Initially, conservation policies emphasized balancing environmental protection with sustainable resource use, laying the groundwork for ecotourism. Over time, however, conservation based tourism shifted into a broader economic strategy, positioning Labuan Bajo as a national tourism hub. To support this transformation, the Indonesian government, alongside private corporations, invested heavily in infrastructure development. These investments include harbor and marine renovations, road expansions, waste management systems, tourism facilities, and workforce training programs. While these developments have improved accessibility and created employment opportunities, they have also accelerated urbanization and increased dependence on tourism related income. As a result, Labuan Bajo's social and economic landscape has been fundamentally reshaped, setting the stage for further analysis of its impacts on local communities in subsequent chapters.
Tourism development in Komodo Island has placed increasing pressure on fragile terrestrial and marine ecosystems. As visitor number rises, habitat supporting species such as Komodo dragons, endemic birds, and native vegetation face growing disturbance. Infrastructure developments for hotels, roads, viewing facilities, and marinas require land clearing, which fragments habitats and alter wildlife behavior. This increases the risks of human wildlife contact, further damaging the current ecosystem in Komodo Island. Marine ecosystems are also affected. Popular activities such as diving, snorkeling, and boat tours damage coral reefs through anchors and boat traffic. Buildup of pollutions from plastic wastes and untreated wastewater also further disrupts marine food chains, threatening species such as manta rays and sea turtles. These environmental changes directly affect local communities that depend on healthy marine ecosystems for fisheries and seaweed cultivation. As a response, ecosystem literacy and sustainability programs has emerged involving local communities in environmental management while also improving their skills in tourism business and conservation. From an economic perspective, tourism has driven growth through large scale government investments in infrastructure and workforce development. These investments increased tourist arrivals, employment opportunities, and indirect economic gains, with tourism generating a positive local multiplier, especially around Komodo National Park. However, these benefits are uneven. Short tourist stays and strong focus on marine tourism limit deeper economic circulation, while land based and cultural tourisms remain underdeveloped. Although tourism has diversified employment and encouraged shifts away from traditional fishing, generating more income, profits have been largely captured by external investors and large firms. Local communities receive smaller shares with income disparities between local and foreign workers, as well as significant economic leakage. Socially, tourism has reshaped community structures while cultural exchange has increased. Tension over identity and tradition have emerged. Rising living costs, land price inflation, and cultural commodification disproportionately affect low income households. Displacement and land dispossession linked to conservation and tourism development have further undermined traditional livelihoods, forcing communities to adapt to tourism based works and often work under insecure conditions. Previous studies support these findings. We reviewed three journals from different authors, and these are what they have discovered. Mahmoud et al. Shown that tourism development zones overlap with highly suitable Komodo dragon habitats, posing ecological risks not only to the Komodo dragon but to the habitat itself as well. Islami et al. Highlights livelihood shifts such as increasing living costs and as well as growing conflicts between local communities and park authorities. Kodir et al. Emphasizes that centralized governance limits community participation as well as unequal distribution of tourism benefits. Together, these studies show that while tourism benefits the communities, however, this undermines the ecological impacts, social changes into the community structure, as well as the economic distribution that is unequal. Previous studies support these findings. We reviewed three journals from different authors, and these are what they have discovered. Mahmoud et al. Shown that tourism development zones overlap with highly suitable Komodo dragon habitats, posing ecological risks not only to the Komodo dragon but to the habitat itself as well. Islami et al. Highlights livelihood shifts such as increasing living costs and as well as growing conflicts between local communities and park authorities. Kodir et al. Emphasizes that centralized governance limits community participation as well as unequal distribution of tourism benefits. Together, these studies show that while tourism benefits the communities, however, this undermines the ecological impacts, social changes into the community structure, as well as the economic distribution that is unequal. Despite extensive research, most studies examine ecological, social, and economic impacts separately. There is limited integrated analysis of how tourism development affects three dimensions simultaneously. To address this gap, this study uses a systematic review approach, synthesizing findings from academic journals, government reports, and international organization publications. Data were analyzed through thematic synthesis focusing on ecological impacts, socioeconomic change, and governance. While this study is limited by reliance on secondary data, it provides a comprehensive overview of tourism development dynamics in Komodo Island and Komodo National Park.
The systematic review finds that tourism development in Komodo National Park and Labuan Bajo has produced a range of outcomes. On one hand, tourism has contributed to economic growth and created new income opportunities. On the other, it has intensified environmental pressure and deepened social inequality. From an ecological perspective, tourism-related infrastructure frequently overlaps with environmentally sensitive zones, including Komodo dragon habitats. This overlap threatens not only the species, but also the wider biodiversity that the national park was created to protect. Economically, tourism has diversified local livelihoods and created new sources of income for the residents. However, local benefits are limited by high levels of economic leakage, external ownership, and unequal wage distribution. Large-scale investors dominate high-value tourism activities, restricting local communities to lower-paid roles and reducing their ability to benefit fully from tourism growth. Socially, tourism has reshaped everyday life for local communities. Shifts away from local traditional livelihoods, like fishing and farming, command reduced access to land and natural resources, have weakened customary rights. These changes have increased social tensions, particularly among marginalized groups who are most dependent on local ecosystems for their survival. Overall, these findings reveal a clear tension between state-led tourism expansion and principles of sustainability and social equity. Addressing this imbalance requires a development approach that places local communities at the center of tourism planning and management. One potential pathway is a community-based tourism, or CBT, which aligns with the principles of sustainable tourism outlined by the UN World Tourism Organization. CBT emphasizes local participation, skill development, and community management tourism initiatives. By positioning residents as both planners and beneficiaries, CBT can reduce economic leakage to community-owned enterprises and promote responsible resource management. In Komodo National Park, CBT has already been introduced, with local residents actively participating in tourism activities. However, existing efforts remain limited and require strengthening to achieve truly meaningful impact. For CBT to be truly effective, public and private partnerships must prioritize local needs, ensure fair wages, promote genuine community engagement, and establish accountability mechanisms to prevent exploitative practices. By strengthening CBT and embedding equity and sustainability into tourism governance, Komodo Island has the potential to develop a tourism industry that not only protects its own environment, but also delivers long-term benefits towards its own people of Labuan Bajo. Tourism has transformed Komodo Island from a region largely dependent on fishing and agriculture into one of the fastest growing tourism destinations in Indonesia. With Labuan Bajo being designated as a super priority tourism destination, large-scale investments have been poured and encourage local workers to shift from traditional livelihoods like fishing and farming to tourism-related jobs. Economically, this shift has brought benefits. Employment opportunities have expanded, household incomes have increased for some residents, and tourism has stimulated wider economic activity through the multiplier effect. For many locals, tourism represents a key source of income and economic growth. However, this development does come with significant costs. Large hotels and tourism establishments have increased pressure on land, driven up living costs, and intensified environmental stressors due to rising tourist numbers. At the same time, local cultural traditions have become increasingly commercialized to meet tourist demand. More importantly, the establishment of Komodo National Park in 1980 marked a turning point for indigenous and local communities. Traditional autonomy was reduced to land enclosure, dispossession, and restrictions on customary practices. Long-standing ways of life such as fishing, farming, and land use were disrupted, forcing communities to adapt to a tourism-driven economy. These changes have contributed to growing disparities economically. While tourism generates substantial profits, these benefits are not shared equally. Lower-income households face higher living costs and increased pressure to commodify their culture, while a large share of tourism revenue flows to external investors instead. This has led to social stratification within the local population. These issues are further intensified by weak governance. Local participation in tourism decision-making remains limited, and economic leakage continues to increase due to insufficient regulation. As a result, tourism profits often fail to support conservation goals or improve long-term local livelihoods in the communities. In response, local communities have attempted to protest and assert their political rights, advocating for fair treatment of their land and recognition of their customary rights. However, the frequent dismissal of these efforts highlights the ongoing exclusion of local voices in tourism expansion and governance. The situation demonstrates the urgent need for development strategies that generally include local community and empower the native people of Labuan Bajo in shaping the future of their island.